everybody, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. I am your host, Taylor Rockwell. Daryl Grove is not with me in studio today. Instead, I'm going to be talking to The Athletic's Carl Anka. Carl has been covering Manchester United for The Athletic all season, and I've asked him to be on the show today to help me make sense of the current Manchester United. It is a very Manchester United-centric podcast as a result, so if you like Manchester United or love Manchester United, you will enjoy it. If you hate them and want to experience the misery and pain of being a Man United fan currently, you can listen to it as well. But it's also really good insight into like the behind-the-scenes stuff that Manchester United need to be doing or are not doing that explains why they are where they are, from a lack of technical director to kind of corporate decisions to cost-effective decisions factoring into on-field decisions. All of it, to me, very interesting. Hopefully will be to you as well. But Carl has lots of knowledge and very good ways of putting things without resorting to cursing, which is something that I was afraid I might do. So with all that said, I will turn it over to pre-recorded me talking to pre-recorded Carl. With me now, I've got Carl Anka of The Athletic and many other publications and podcasts. Were you on the Totally Football show this week? Is that what I saw?
I was on Totally Football this morning.
Oh, there we go. All right, so hopefully you're not like podcasted out. Hopefully you can handle some questions about Man United because you've been covering them all season. How were you feeling heading into the derby, and how were you feeling at full time yesterday?
I was feeling, I want to say pessimistic.
Yeah.
Sort of going, right, like, we're not going to beat Manchester City. I have a few Liverpool supporting friends that were telling me this was the big title deciding game, and I was going, boys, no, lower your expectations. Manchester United aren't very good and City are very good, so this wasn't going to happen. And lo and behold, one of them thanked me for lowering their expectations, saying I was going to get excited, but actually after the first 20 minutes I realized United aren't very good anymore. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they're not.
And so was that sort of like, were you able to effectively tamper your own expectations? Because I feel like even when I do that, I still secretly am like, but maybe they're going to be good. Maybe they're going to turn it on. And then I still end up being disappointed.
So you can do the stats, right? Mm-hmm. So you can go into the Derby game on April 7th last season, where United had to beat City to stop them from winning the league at the Etihad. Mm-hmm. And that was interesting. I had absolutely no faith in United winning that game, and they won 3-2. I admit for my sins, I didn't watch that game live because I said I'm not going to watch this pain be inflicted on me with my own two eyes. But this Manchester United side isn't as good as they were last year. Certain key personnel that were helping Manchester United outperform their XG are no longer standing on top of their heads, performing out of their skins. And now Manchester United are performing closer to what they are, which is the 4th to 6th best team in the country. Whereas Manchester City have found a way to get even better than they were last season, despite all of their injuries.
You may have just answered it right there, but what do you make of the criticism that's been directed at David De Gea? Some have blamed him for both goals. I think you could probably put a little bit of blame on him for the first one, more so blame on him for the second one. What have you made of that criticism?
It's to be expected. So let's put this perfectly clear. David De Gea is and was probably the best goalkeeper in the world last season, right? In terms of what he was doing with the defense in front of him, the saves he was pulling off, and how he was essentially the entire defense of Manchester United. He took a team that had an XG defensive record that should have put them somewhere 5th in the league and took them to 2nd because of just remarkable saves over and over and over again. He's not that person anymore. He's been a good goalkeeper since the start of the World Cup, and he's not really gone back into greatness status outside 2 or 3 games this season, one of them particularly being the Tottenham Hotspur game. I think what's a really interesting thing is I imagine some football scouts are noticing some of the weaknesses in De Gea's play now. So both Bernardo Silva's goal and Leroy Sané's goal were taken quite quickly. Strikers are beginning to shoot earlier now with De Gea. So De Gea's great strength is basically he saves quite a lot of his feet. He gets down quite low. He does what is in cricket is known as long barrier technique, and he can't do that. He can't play to his strengths and get down low and make a lot of saves with his legs jutted out if you shoot early. And I think that's what's beginning to be found out. He is not making the saves he used to make because players are shooting a lot quicker than it used to be, and De Gea's unsettled, and it's not helped by the fact that De Gea's back four is mid-table quality, mid-table to Europa League quality. David De Gea is no longer a top 5 goalkeeper in the world, but that's not so much David De Gea's fault, but so much he's had to put in so many saves. There's now just so much more game footage for scouts to go, oh, there's your weakness.
So then, first of all, I was really curious when you paused on that back four, what that, like, the word after the pause was going to be. When you're like, that back four is, it could have been so many different words, which I think is kind of revealing. But it's also, I guess I just keep going back to, like, so then you hear all the talk about, like, oh, they're going to have to reinvest, they're going to have to spend a lot of money, they're going to have to bring in a lot of players. And what I keep going back to is, like, it's not as though they haven't been spending. I mean, they're not pulling a Spurs and, like, literally spending no money. They've been bringing in players. It just feels like they've been bringing in the wrong players. So how do you explain the fact that they have been investing, but they sort of look at this point where they are probably weaker than we've seen them in many, many years?
I think they're investing with a completely reactive status. So you want to make a parallel. Let's look at Manchester City, right? Okay, so Manchester City now are the result of 10 years of careful planning and best practice, and following the best practice people in football. So no player is bought by Manchester City unless they have a very clear role, unless they have a very clear position as to where they are right now, how they're fit to decide right now, how they're fit to decide 2 to 3 seasons from now, and at what point should they be moved on. You want a really good example of that? Basically, you look at the lineage now between Phil Foden being brought through right now, who can take over the reins from Bernardo Silva, and Bernardo Silva is currently being taught how to play much like David Silva in a sort of a Pokemon evolution chart right now. You've got 3 fantastic centre midfielders that are all learning from each other and will all take that club for the next 5 years. When you look at Manchester United, let's look at their back four. So David Moyes didn't get to make a centre-back signing. Louis van Gaal wanted a ball-playing, left-footed centre-back and got Marcus Rojo. That was a mistake. That was a ridiculous mistake. Then we got Daley Blind. Jose Mourinho didn't believe Daley Blind was of the correct physical type to cope with the Premier League, so Daley Blind was moved on. Then we brought in Eric Bailly. Eric Bailly now basically had a bust-up with Mourinho due to Bailly's reluctance to continue playing through injury. Victor Lindelof has only recently come good. And now you've got Solskjaer going, why have I still got to use Chris Smalling and Phil Jones and whatnot? Why is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is using Matteo Darmian. Darmian, a player who was bought by Louis van Gaal, who only played 2 or 3 times under Mourinho this season, and then was slotted into a back 3 for Solskjaer against City, and it's no surprise Darmian made a colossus mistake in the build-up to the second goal, where he gets dragged out of position and ends up in this vertical back 4. United have spent a lot of money. They've spent a lot of money very badly without a semblance of a plan, and this is what you get.
So then where are we in terms of them trying to go for a director of football? Because it sounds lately like they're maybe not even going to do that and instead go the technical director route.
Yes, it's really interesting there. I think what's going to happen is Manchester United are going to make a mistake with this technical director. I think the years of Glazonomics and Ed Woodward's interesting approach to football hiring.
That's well said.
Have left us in a position where essentially, rather than doing what Manchester City did, where Manchester City went, right, we want to become a qualified mid-table team, let's copy Arsenal. Now, then they surpassed Arsenal and how to become one of the best teams in Europe. And let's copy what Barcelona are doing. I think Manchester United are very much drawn of what's the most cost-effective way to get this done. So if you look at the candidates, we went from potential candidates like Paul Mitchell, who worked with Mauricio Pochettino at Southampton, and Marotta, who was one of the directors that helped Juventus turn over their midfield and help them win several Serie A titles in a row, to now talking about promoting within. So one of the recent rumors was basically giving the technical director job to Mike Phelan.
Yeah.
And I've also heard conversation about giving it to Gary Neville. I think Gary Neville won't quite be there because he has his own views about Manchester United ownership. But if you're Manchester United right now and you need to get a technical director, you should not be looking within. You should be spending a lot of money going, who is the best in the world at being a technical director? Who's the best in the world at being a director of football? And how much money will it take? Because no matter how much money it costs them now, you are saving millions, possibly percentages of billions in the future. Manchester United have spent £500 million very poorly because they don't have a director of football. You need a good one so you don't make mistakes like that.
So then when you say it's about being like the cost-effective solution for Manchester United from their perspective, is that simply just like, in your opinion, that they don't want to have to spend, like pay somebody $10 million to get their director of football, so instead they're going to promote somebody from within and hope that it works out? Like, is that what you mean, or do you mean more so that they're just trying to do like the cheapest option at every possible situation?
I think it's the first one. I think ease of use and money saved helps. If you can do it quickly and easily, you tend to do it in any company. And then, sooner or later you realize your employees are being overworked and things aren't going the way they used to. And I think that's what's happened to Manchester United. I think they made a lot of cheaper decisions. I think they made a lot of easier decisions. I think that the fact they hired Solskjaer and gave him the permanent deal after 2 league losses rather than wait until the end of the summer and then offer Pochettino, see what Pochettino will be open to, shows that they are more considered to the cost-effective or the easy option rather than a difficult one. Let's make no mistake. Mauricio Pochettino is on 8.5 million a year at Tottenham Hotspur. I don't think Solskjaer's on that much money, and I think that helped with his hiring.
That's really interesting because I do think that it's easy when you're looking at the way United have operated, either as a neutral who's interested in what they're doing or as a fan. I think a lot of times Ed Woodward gets looked at as like sort of in like almost being incompetent. Like, I don't know any better. I'm just going to hire Solskjaer. I don't know any better. I'm going to spend all the money on Alexis Sanchez. And I think, yeah, you're right that if you see it from a different lens of, oh no, he's just doing what he has to do to get the immediate situation dealt with, but maybe also save money in whatever situation he can, so that instead of it just being like, oh yeah, he's succumbing to the will of the fans and hiring Solskjaer full time, instead it's, I can do this and then not spend like whatever I'm going to have to pay Pochettino to be manager plus whatever compensation I have to pay to Tottenham. It does take on a more corporate-y vibe, which does feel more appropriate for the current Manchester United.
Yes, right. And it's been said very often about Ed Woodward that he's not a football man, which is fine. And it's very often used as an insult. But let's make no mistake, what Ed Woodward is good at, he's very good at. You can talk about Manchester United's 4.9 rated mobile phone app and their noodle partners and their mattress partners and their commercial brand, but they are very good as a commercial entity because of the decisions Ed Woodward has made. And that will keep Manchester United as a very good money spinning exercise, and will keep Manchester United, if not in the Champions League competition places, but it will mean that barring a complete David Moyes-esque disaster, they should rarely fall out of the top 7. That's what Ed Woodward's good at. But in terms of footballing knowledge and how should we term this? Playing football as if it's a game of chess, so 3 or 4 moves ahead, I don't think he's very good at that, because let's make no mistake, it's very, very hard to do. Right, the majority of football clubs make more wrong decisions than they make right ones. If you want to look at football clubs that consistently make correct decisions, you've got Bayern Munich, who do that because they've got a deep lineage of former pros and managers who work on their board. You've got, to an extent, Barcelona, but a lot of the cracks are paved up by the fact they've got the greatest football player of all time in Lionel Messi. And you've got Juventus, who have the advantage of being one of the first clubs who understand how FFP worked. So when the Milan clubs basically faded away, they were like, oh, sweet, we can just get the first 2 Serie A's. And basically in Italy, that is still recovering from the match fixing scandal. There are only 3 or 4 clubs in European football that make consistently good decisions. That Manchester United are making consistently bad ones is frustrating, but this is part of the course for most people in football.
We will get back to my conversation with Mickey Turner in just a moment. But first, Daryl Grove's in studio.
Hello.
Hello, Daryl.
Yeah, I am. I'm here. When listeners are hearing this, I won't be here.
This is
right
true.
now I am.
I mean, that could be at any time. So that's technically not true. If someone's listening to this like a month from now and you're in studio when they're listening,
yes.
There you go.
Well, hopefully this interview will live on forever and ever.
Face. But no, Daryl Grove is with me to help me talk about today's sponsor,
Yes.
Grip 6 Belts.
Yes, it's an question ad insert.
There we go.
Right, there's going to be a question in the middle of this. Today's sponsor, as Taylor said, is Grip 6 Belts. You've heard about them on the Total Soccer Show by now. Alexis Guerreros of the Cooligans can't understand how they work. I'm thinking all our other listeners can.
I did enjoy that he asked us to explain it, and then we showed him how it worked, and he immediately lost interest. I think because it was just so simple that he was like, "Oh, okay, like it just works that way. All right, that's perfect."
It's magic, right? It's complicated to explain, but simple to do.
Yep.
That's the magic. You
There
don't
you
have
go.
to understand the mechanism. Grip 6 invented it, and they understand the mechanism. You just have to wear it.
Yeah, it's also got like the low profile. They talk about that, how it doesn't necessarily stand out so much. That's not necessarily Alexis's style.
Oh, yeah.
But then again, you could add in like
He's a high-profile individual.
But you can add in like the different colors, so you can add the splash of color.
Yeah.
You can make it like bright orange if you want to. Maybe that is more Alexis's
Yeah,
style.
you get it to pop, right?
Yeah.
We're just a bit more low-key.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I'm glad my belt does not pop. I wore it to a funeral this weekend.
Oh, right, yeah.
And
Popping is not the ideal thing.
And I had a
to do.
choice because my brother-in-law forgot a belt. I had the like more formal, more standard belt, and then I had the Grip 6 belt. He got the old school belt. I wore my Grip 6 to the funeral.
He was stuck in the past and you were propelling towards the future.
Of course. That's definitely how it was.
So, yeah, like you said, we focus on the sort of low-profile, like, this is very... a belt you can wear without it really standing out,
Yeah.
if that's what you want, because that's our style. But yeah, you can go with the conservation series we talked about in the past. You can have all kinds of logos on there. You can even get the Total Soccer Show logo for an extra $10. You just have to request it.
We have that one. I wear that
do.
one on occasion.
I do.
I have found I love our logo and all the design. Thank you again to that aforementioned brother-in-law for the help with that one. But it is still weird when you're wearing like your own product a little bit for me
Yeah.
still. It's like if you're in a band and you're wearing your own band's t-shirt.
Yeah, you feel a bit
feels
too self-promo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife posted a photo of us and I had like a Total Soccer Show shirt on and I felt very conflicted about it. But yes, I don't have the same level of consternation when it comes to Grip 6 belts because they're so easy, they're so wonderful, and they're fully guaranteed. If anything breaks, if anything goes wrong, they will replace that belt.
The A3 Guarantee.
Oh,
do you know what the three A's are?
I don't know.
Anytime, any reason,
Do you know what the 3 A's are?
something else. It's anytime, any reason, something
Anywhere?
else.
I'm guessing they'll send it to you anywhere. That's going to be my
Maybe.
That's my guess.
I'm on their website now. I was really hoping I could do it. Okay, I said anytime, any reason, any condition.
There we go.
Anytime, any reason, any condition. And if it does break, we want to know how you managed to accomplish such a feat, is what they say.
This is me being a jerk. I had that in front of me. I just wanted to see how long it would take you. Yes,
Taylor.
but I also had it in front of me because I wanted to let our listeners know that they can get the TSS discount by going to grip6.com/TSS. That's GRIP, the number 6.com/TSS. You can get 33% off their classic pack, 20% off a standard belt.
And it really is a special for TSS listeners. If you go to that URL, you will get like a Total Soccer Show logo and a Welcome Total Soccer Show listeners page. It is just for you. People who listen to other podcasts are not allowed there.
No, of course not. That's why Alexis Guerreros will never find out about it. All the more reason. So thank you to Grip 6 for sponsoring today's episode. A link to Grip 6 belts will be in the show notes, obviously. We did want to answer one listener question. We have many, many listener questions to get to in the catalog, the back catalog.
The catalog, yeah.
But
the reservoir.
Yes, but we're going to go with Cameron Tattle. I apologize. Either way. Cameron asks, as Anthony Hudson has done with the Colorado Rapids, do you guys think that a coach bringing players with them when they move clubs is a good or bad thing for the players and the clubs?
So the example of Anthony Hudson at the Colorado Rapids is he was the former New Zealand coach, I believe, when he took the job in 2017, I want to say. And he brought with him players he knew, Tommy Smith and Declan Wynn, two New Zealand players that he brought to the Colorado Rapids.
Yes, and as with most things that we answer when it comes to the Total Soccer Show, I'm going to say the answer depends on the situation, but I would say generally I'm inclined to say it's not as good of an idea. And that's a recent
It's a strong take.
change for me.
So why do you say it's not such a good idea to bring players that you know with you?
Because I basically tried to do in preparation for answering this question, I didn't want to just be all over the place. So I tried to jot down okay, why is it good? Why is it bad? And I came up with about the same, but in the end that felt like it maybe wasn't a good or a positive thing. If it answers out as 0, then I feel like that tends to be negative.
Okay, but you got to show your work, right? What are the pros and cons that led you to this conclusion?
All right, so a good example would be if it's an actual position of need. So if the club you're moving to desperately needs a number 6, like a holding midfielder who does this exact role that you need, and you're coming from a club where you had that exact player, and you think that they will fit into the system and fit in with that club's kind of profile, then to me that makes sense because you're kind of coming in with the familiarity, but you're filling an actual position of need.
And then your connections are making a move move happen that maybe might not have happened.
Exactly.
Yeah?
I would say the counter to that would be something like with Jorginho and Maurizio Sarri, where Jorginho came in and there was a lot of confusion because N'Golo Kante had been playing that number 6 role for Chelsea.
Yeah, in a very different way, right? In
Absolutely.
a more defensive way, but it's still it's not the same position, it's not the same role, but it's the same position on the field.
It is.
And you can't have both of them.
And that leads to confusion because then you're looking at this Chelsea team who have this player that pretty much every club in the world would want on their roster, except that
Conte?
you're moving them out of position to bring in Jorginho. And I think then it can look at sort of that manager coming in is inflexible, that they're going to do what they want to do. They're going to play this exact system. And it almost kind of shows weakness that you're saying, like, I have to have this player, otherwise my entire system doesn't work. That doesn't look good. That's not a very good look.
Blanket.
Yeah, exactly, because suddenly it's like, well, hold on. Is this entire system predicated on one player? Does that make all the other players immaterial? Do you still need to sign other players?
I'm going to double down on this as well.
Yeah.
I think it was always going to be tough to ask Chelsea fans to adapt to a new system, a new style of play, right? It's going to take maybe some time to implement. If you're Sarri, coming in, playing Sarri ball. But if you do that by bringing a player with you that is like the embodiment of Sarri ball, which is kind of the reason he brought him, right? Brought him, both. If you bring the embodiment of Sarri ball, and the embodiment of Sarri ball displaces one of the most popular players at the club from his preferred position, where he's been doing a thing that fans love for years, it makes it that much harder for fans to fall in love with Sarri ball, right?
Exactly.
So that makes it that's a tough one there.
Honestly, dude, what I'm realizing as we have this conversation is that I think it comes down, I know this sounds like an oversimplification, but like it comes down to how good of a coach you are is really what it comes down to. Because if you're Guardiola and you're coming in, this would be another one. If it's filling a position not necessarily of need, but of specialization, and you think about Joe Hart at Man City, who's basically a club legend. But he doesn't play with his feet. He doesn't do what Guardiola wants a goalkeeper to do. So then you go out and you find a keeper who does, except maybe Claudio Bravo doesn't. So then you go out and find another keeper who does.
Yeah.
But if you're Guardiola and you have that reputation coming in, then I think there's more inclination to say, like, okay, we'll back him. Okay, we'll back him again. If that were... I'll mention him again later. Frank de Boer coming in, and he said, "Oh, never mind. This system isn't working. That goalkeeper's not working. I needed a whole different goalkeeper."
Right. Why did you mention Guardiola? Because he doesn't. I don't think he of him as someone who does take players with him so much.
I guess that's. I'm using him as an example.
You didn't get
of,
Mamo Neuer to
like,
play for Man City, right?
No, but like, say he brought Thiago. He brought Thiago from Barcelona to Bayern Munich.
Yeah.
And I think that worked out more like pretty well for him. They won some titles. But I also think that if it hadn't worked out, it still would be, he brought this player. He wanted to see if it worked. It didn't. That's not going to be a make or break thing for Pep Guardiola because of his reputation.
And also his reputation is such that he has a very specific Guardiola style of play. And it does require a like pivotish type midfielder, kind of like how Sarri was so obsessed with Jorginho. And yet Guardiola did it with Busquets at Barcelona. Eventually he signed Xabi Alonso at Bayern Munich. He goes to Manchester City and he's like, oh, what have we got here? Fernandinho, which people hadn't really been celebrating Fernandinho, but he turned Fernandinho into his pivot player, and he's been great for the last 2 years, right? Maybe 3 years. So I think that's an interesting counterexample to what Sarri did. Maybe find a player that fits your system. It doesn't have to be someone you already know.
It does not. But if it is going to be, again, it can be like a nuanced thing here, but I think it can be a good thing if that player is bringing loyalty into the equation. Then I think it has to be, is that player good? And the player I would point to for this one...
Is that player good?
Yeah, like, because if it's a player coming in who's not that good, who isn't necessarily going to be a starter, but all they do is say, like, hey, trust me, he's a great coach, then they just come across as like a sycophant, and they're not necessarily backing it up. They're not actually helping you, and they can easily be isolated within the locker room because they're just like, okay, yeah, he's his guy. We don't really need him around. Whereas I look at somebody like Ricardo Carvalho with Jose Mourinho going from Porto to Chelsea to Real Madrid.
Yeah.
By the way, I did not know all these off the top of my head. We definitely did a little bit of research. But Carvalho has the reputation, both as a winner and as a player, that I think if he goes to Real Madrid and says, look, this is what we're doing, I'm trusting him, you all should too, I think he commands that level of respect that players will think, okay, I'll listen to Ricardo Carvalho as opposed to like this third string goalkeeper that really, really likes Jose Mourinho. I don't think that works as well.
And Carvalho was basically successful everywhere, right?
Everywhere. No matter where he went. He went to a cooking class, he could cook instantly. That's how good Ricardo Carvalho is. My other two bad ones, like the bad instance would be similar to what we talked about with Maurizio Sarri, if it's frustrating settled players, if people who feel like, okay, this has been working. As an example, just say like a manager retires and like Sir Alex Ferguson. If Sir Alex Ferguson went out on top winning the Premier League and then a new manager comes in and sacks a bunch of players and brings in other players, suddenly it's like, well, you're rocking a boat that didn't need to be rocked. Why are you doing this? And I think it instantly leads to frustration in the locker room.
Did David Moyes sign Marouane Fellaini when no one else would join.
I mean, yep, pretty much. Or when they couldn't afford to get anybody else.
And
yep.
that wasn't a popular move at the time,
Not
right?
so much.
That was no one else will come here. It seemed like Ander Herrera,
I can't believe I didn't have that in my notes. Ander Herrera was a weird situation, but yeah.
Do you know where I remember that from?
Where?
Right here.
Off the top of your head?
Yep.
There we go. But that's a really good example, yeah, because I think that there was talk that maybe Thiago was going to join Manchester United. I think it was maybe the Pedro season that they were definitely going to sign him, and then they didn't.
They're after Ander Herrera, remember?
Yeah, and then there was the whole thing where like his agents weren't actually agents or the Man United reps. Either way. That's a perfect example of suddenly it's like, wait, hold on, is he good enough? Would Sir Alex Ferguson have signed him? Would this have worked out?
He was a bad symbol for Moyes as
that's
well.
really, really good.
I actually think Fellaini's a really good footballer, but he's not like that Manchester United level superstar necessarily. He's more someone who do really well at Everton.
Yeah.
And I think that was the problem, that it's almost like lowered the bar of what Manchester United expect by signing Fellaini.
Yeah. Agreed.
So bad move, David Moyes.
And then the other bad one that I looked at as his coaching tenure to see if he had any of these, and he does. It's Frank de Boer at Crystal Palace.
Oh no, FDB.
Yeah, Crystal Palace under Frank de Boer in his 10 games in charge thereabout. He's
sojourned to London.
He brought in Jairo Riedewald. Remember Jairo Riedewald?
Vaguely.
Who he was familiar with from his many years at Ajax. Riedewald came through the Ajax Academy, played at young Ajax when Frank de Boer was there. And not necessarily saying that Frank de Boer was like, this is the kid, it's going to turn it all around. But there is an element of you're bringing somebody in who you claim to have the familiarity with. And so it's a little bit of like, trust me, this guy's going to come good. And if that guy doesn't come good, it's 100% on you. And in this case, Jairo Riedewald has gone on to make 12 total appearances, including when Frank de Boer was there in 2 seasons at Crystal Palace.
He's still there?
He is still there. Ooh. Exactly. That would be my point.
Okay, I want to go a positive example.
Sure.
It's actually one that you came up with in research, so I'm kind of stealing it from you. I hope you forgive me. Graziano Pelle, who Ronald Koeman, I believe, went from Feyenoord to Southampton.
There was another one, like maybe PSV, and there was like Feyenoord, PSV, Southampton. He followed him to all 3 clubs. So, something like that.
But that was an example of someone who maybe most Premier League teams will not now take a gamble on a Dutch striker for all kinds of historical non-goal scoring reasons. Some big tall target guy, I could see how he would have never ended up in the Premier League, but because Koeman knew him, understood him, took him with him.
Yeah.
My memory of that season of Pele with Koeman at Southampton, really, really good, really successful season. Yeah. Right? And he ends up in China earning loads of money, which is, I guess, great for Pele's wallet. But worth remembering that it's Pella, right? Didn't they pronounce it Pella?
Or like Pella.
There we go. He didn't fail in the Premier League at all. He just kind of got... he got that offer from China, essentially.
And got at odds with Claude Puel when he was at Southampton.
But who among us hasn't?
I mean, several players on several teams would back up that he's maybe not the easiest to get along with.
So maybe what we're landing into here is that when it's like you're bringing maybe knowledge of a player that no one else has and you think he'll be a good secret fit for the system, then it's good.
Yep.
But when you're just sort of maybe don't back yourself to sign new players and don't trust yourself to venture outside of what you already know and you just lean back on Marouane Fellaini, that's when it goes wrong.
I would agree, yes. And then my last one I would say that can be slightly negative is if you're not able to sort of see the writing on the wall or you let emotion factor into the decision.
Like loyalty to the player?
Yeah, and I would say one of those examples would be, albeit it was only on loan, but Jose Mourinho signing Michael Essien, who I guess Mourinho called son and Michael Essien called daddy, which is interesting. But that's a Michael Essien.
I'd call him son with knee problems.
Exactly. It's Michael Essien who's slightly past his peak at that point. And so if you were bringing him in to be this like the bison, the enforcer, this like solid box-to-box midfielder that he was for Chelsea, that he was like this terrifying midfielder for Chelsea, and you think he's going to do that, but maybe he's a little bit physically past that, you're getting a different player. And then it's not bringing in the player that you're familiar with. You're bringing in another player that you thought you were familiar with that now you have to adapt to. And that makes it almost harder. And so I think that's where I go back to, in the end, it feels like there are slightly more negatives than there are positives when it comes to managers taking this approach.
There we go. So you want to do blanket ban on signing players you already know?
Get out of here. No, I do not. Because otherwise, Harry Redknapp would not have signed Nico Cranchar at, I think, literally every club he's managed. I don't mean that literally, but, you get my point.
But close. Yes. And Peter Crouch and Jermaine Defoe. Redknapp definitely had a list of players.
Yeah. And it all worked out for the best every single time.
I mean, half the time? Half of the time it works every time. Thank you to Cameron for the question. If you've got a question for us, please send it to totalsoccershow.com/questions.
Please do indeed. Before we get back to my interview with Gennaro, I also wanted to talk about today's sponsor, Talisman Caps. Does that work for you, Mr. Grove?
It does. I doff my cap to Talisman Caps.
All right.
I doff my Talisman cap.
First of all, that's the appropriate thing to do. But second of all, this is maybe a listener question for another day or a host question. Where does doff come from and how do you spell that one?
I spell it DOFF, and I plead the fifth on the first part of that
I'm going to assume
question.
it's some like British Lord Duff was famous for taking off his cap to show
must be it.
civility.
Lord Duff.
Yes, yes. And Lord Duff would probably look
He
good
writes
in...
for the Telegraph, by the way.
Of course he does. And he would look good in a talisman cap because you know who looks good in a talisman cap?
Everybody?
That's correct. And that's because they have varieties of different caps of different styles, of different clubs and countries. So regardless of who you root for, regardless of who you support, they're likely going to have you covered.
Especially Spurs and Arsenal. I know they're prominently featured.
Yes, they are.
On the front page, if you're into that. And
If you're anywhere in Minnesota, they've definitely got you covered.
definitely, because this is a Minnesota-based company, right? So they have a lot of Minnesota gear.
And here's my question. I know they would say yes because, you know, they want to move some caps, but their Minnesota caps are all awesome. Like they really are. I like every single one of them. I live in Virginia. I have never been to Minnesota yet. Been to
Same.
Minnesota. I would
Yeah,
like to
yeah.
go. I want to check out that new stadium. Am I allowed to wear a Minnesota hat even though I have no loyalty to Minnesota?
I wouldn't stop you.
I guess I have loyalty to Talisman caps and they're in Minnesota, and I like Atmosphere
There
and
you
Prince and they're
go.
from Minnesota. So boom, done.
There you go.
There we go.
That should seal it for
If Talisman did a Prince hat, I'm all in.
you. There's an idea.
Yeah.
There's
I feel like
an
they may
idea.
have done a purple hat at some point.
Prince is more of a basketball guy than a soccer guy, right?
It's fine. It's fine.
Oh, lots of great caps on there. Obviously, there's the Icon series that we always talk about. El Peeb, Mia Hamm, all kinds of famous soccer players
Two players that put together every time.
represented. One of them's a World Cup winner, with a nice graphic design on the top of the hat.
Yes, and it is, we're moving into the warmer months. Finally, we think. I still don't really trust Richmond weather in March/April. But Daryl's wearing shorts.
It's happened. I'm
showed
declaring
them.
it the start of Richmond spring.
I'm declaring those short shorts. But I think, so if you're going to be out watching games this summer, you can wear the Talisman cap so you can rep your club, support local if you want to wear that hat, but you can also keep the sun out of your eyes, watch everything that's happening on the field without missing a beat.
All that is true. I just want to let listeners know that I've just found a new hat.
What you got?
It might not be new, but it's new to me. There's the Talisman Bromance cap, and I think it's Aubameyang and Lacazette.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Doing the handshake and the bow. Yeah, the Talisman Bromance cap, inspired by the North London Bromance.
It's interesting you bring that up because I've looked at all of their offerings on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah.
And I still managed to find a new one, or like seemingly a new one every time. The one I hadn't noticed is I think it's Thierry Henry in the France jersey. I love the 98 France jersey. It's him standing by the corner flag. That's
Yes.
one I hadn't seen before, and I saw it today and thought, I could wear that.
Are
that.
we not observant enough, or they just keep sneaking new ones in?
Yes.
If you want to take a look for yourself, it's talismancaps.com. Link will be in the show notes. And the promo code is TOTALSOCCER20 for 20% off any purchase of $35 or more.
There we are. So thank you to Talisman Caps for sponsoring today's episode. Daryl Grove, thank you for taking the time to talk sponsors and to answer a listener question with me. Anything else you'd like to add before I force you out the door?
Please don't force me out the door.
Get out.
I'd like to leave of my own free will. Just that I'll be obviously off the show until next Tuesday. Can do some chemotherapy. Then I'll be back next Tuesday on the Total Soccer Show.
This episode is actually airing next Wednesday.
Is that right?
No, it's not. So Daryl, rest up, get well. We will talk to you next week. But until then, here is the rest of my conversation with Mr. Carl Anka. So you said it's very, very hard to do. You said there's only 3 or 4 clubs that are doing it properly. I'm going to ask you now, though. If the Glazers came to you, like, Carl, what would you like to see? Because I guess I'm asking this both as, like, a person hosting the show, but also as a Manchester United supporter myself. I'm just wondering, like, because United are going to go out, again, as I said earlier, it's really hard for me to, like, keep my expectations realistic. And I feel like as soon as United go out and sign Koulibaly for £75 million, I'm going to think like, ooh, wait, hold on, maybe things are better, even though I know that they're not because things haven't actually been rectified. It's just more of the same. So what, if it were you, like what would you want to see? Or if you were given the power by the Glazers, what would be your kind of steps to provide stability for the club?
I would very, very quietly go to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and say, we would like to move you to an ambassadorial role. We were too hasty in giving this decision. It didn't work out. I would then walk up to Pochettino's representatives and say, we are willing to triple your salary. Go talk to Daniel Levy and see what he's willing to give you next season. That's one of the truly annoying things, is that Manchester United didn't even try to get Pochettino. Now, Pochettino was not a guaranteed success at Manchester United, but he was worth pursuing because if you do get him, at the very least, Spurs stop being Pochettino-powered Spurs. So a top 6 becomes a top 5 because you've taken their man. The fact that United didn't even make that an option is intensely frustrating. So that would have been one of my approaches as well. I would have absolutely gone for Paul Mitchell as the director of football, because he's proven himself in his stints at Southampton and at Red Bull Leipzig. And I would have sent out agents all around the world and followed best practice. I would have seen what Red Bull are doing at a senior level with all of their Red Bull clubs at Salzburg, at Leipzig, and in their clubs in Australia, and said, "How are you doing this? How are you turning yourself into the Starbucks of football?" I would have looked into that. I would have had a very serious conversation with Paul Pogba and David De Gea and said, "Gentlemen, if you would like to leave, you are free to leave. You cost 150 million each. Please prove it to the rest of the world right now, but you can leave." And we had a very serious conversation with Alexis Sanchez saying, "I'm really sorry, but I don't think it's going to work out. Would you be interested in going to China?" There is a mishmash of quality and style in the Manchester United squad. You've got players who were brought in to play under a very esoteric system of Louis van Gaal still there. You've got players that were brought in to play a very claustrophobic smash mouth football style of Mourinho there, and trying to heal from Mourinho's brutalist methods. And you have some youth players that very much could lead the way for a pleasing season next year. I don't think Manchester United will finish in the top four this season. I don't think they'll finish in the top four next season. But I think the key thing for the next 3 seasons that Solskjaer may be in charge of is that he has to get rid of everything, or as much of the bad as possible, so the next person that takes over can go, "Okay, now I can make my charge."
So before we talk about what he might do, I wanted to ask you first, you when talking about what you would do, you talked about like moving Solskjaer to an ambassadorial role. You said it didn't work out. So is that a feeling you've had even when he was still the interim manager, even when he was appointed? Or is it something that lately you've been feeling like, nah, this just is not going to work? He hasn't proven it yet, and now I have my doubts that he'll be able to prove it at all.
No, I've been a long-standing don't hire him permanently. Okay. The really interesting thing about Mourinho is that he constantly repeats himself. The mask is the face, and he basically becomes parody. And because Mourinho repeats himself and always has these third season meltdowns, it means that there is a blueprint to replacing Mourinho at a number of clubs, right? Chelsea, after they removed him in the 2015-16 season, they removed Mourinho. They brought in Gus Hiddink to heal the dressing room. They went on a 15-game unbeaten run, and then they lost I think they drew 2 and lost 2 of the final games of the season. Then Gus Hiddink departed. Then they went off and got Antonio Conte. For Real Madrid, they got in Ancelotti as the interim. He healed the dressing room for a little bit, and they eventually moved on to Zinedine Zidane. You don't hire the HR specialist post Mourinho. You bring an HR specialist, and then you bring the person you're supposed to bring in afterwards. Chelsea made a slight mistake by bringing in Conte because he's a brutalist of a different nature. And Real Madrid managed to succeed with Zidane because they had Cristiano Ronaldo and had some Champions Leagues. Manchester United should have stuck to the plan of bring in Solskjaer. When the season is done and everyone's healed, go out and get whoever you want to get, which for all counts would have been Pochettino. And the depressing thing was the plan looked to be working. Solskjaer had healed the dressing room. The issue is that he almost overachieved. The PSG game more or less guaranteed his permanent hiring because we know Ed Woodward likes cost effectiveness, and basically Ed Woodward would have been foolish to throw away that sort of goodwill. But what they should have done is waited until the end of the season rather than hired him on a permanent basis after 2 league defeats.
So I'm very much with you in that I really liked what Solskjaer was doing when he was interim manager. I was excited to see how he seemed to have turned things around. It still did not make sense to me when they hired him because I think, as you've already said, or like at least very much strongly alluded to, is that like no one else is coming in and giving him a huge contract. Madrid are not going to try to poach Solskjaer. So it didn't feel like there was any leverage there. It didn't feel like there was any need to make that immediate decision. To me, it felt like an emotional decision in the moment. in this conversation, I'm slowly realizing that maybe it's more so a practical cost-cutting decision from Ed Woodward. But I am also still confused because I agree with you that it felt like he came in, healed the dressing room, got everybody on the same page, kind of returned like to normalcy of Manchester United, quote unquote. And yet here we are now with that performance against Everton. I mean, that looked like a team that had given up on the manager again. They didn't look as bad against Man City, but it was very clear that there is a gulf in class and there are certain players who couldn't handle that level. So I'm wondering, like, do you think that locker room has been as healed as we thought? Do you think it was just maybe momentum made things better briefly? Because I'm really struggling to figure out why they've looked so lackluster in a few of their more recent performances.
Oh, I will tell you.
All right.
It is because they're knackered. So you remember Manchester United were on a very, very good undefeated domestic record. Then the international break came along, and they went from warm weather training in the Gulf region. And they came back, and then against Liverpool, 6 players got injured. So one of the key things about Manchester United between Mourinho, interim Solskjaer and permanent Solskjaer is Mourinho doesn't press. Mourinho's teams rarely press. It's one reason why Mourinho will never really challenge for a league title again, is because he doesn't press. He doesn't instruct his teams to press. On the Solskjaer and Mike Phelan, Manchester United did press. They didn't press to the top 2 levels of Spurs and Liverpool, but they were pressing to a Champions League quality effect. Now, you can't turn your team from a non-pressing side to a pressing side overnight. And that showed, basically. They went off to warm weather training. They got a couple of weeks off, and then the legs went. They are absolutely knackered. The really interesting thing about the Everton game was Everton players ran 8 kilometers more than Manchester United in that 4-0 defeat. Everton are a well-drilled pressing side. Idrissa Gueye is, in the nicest way, a store brand N'Golo Kante. Manchester United haven't got a player like that. They haven't got a player to press and harry to the extent they want to. Jesse Lingard is a shadow of the player he was prior to his 2 hamstring injuries. And same thing with Anthony Martial. They are. It's not so much they've given up on their manager, but they're.
They can't even be asked to answer the question because they're breathing so heavily as to whether or not they've given up on their manager. That makes sense.
Truly, I think Paul Pogba, with his comments about a dream would be to play to Real Madrid, I don't think that is having anything to do with I've given up on Solskjaer. I think that has more to do with Paul Pogba being a singular-minded and very driven football player, which he is within his own rights to. And I don't think there are any personnel that are going, I don't like this football match, I don't want to do it anymore. I think a lot of those players were working far beyond their physical capabilities for 10 weeks, and then now you're seeing a drop-off. Whether or not things will improve when they get a preseason remains to be seen.
So I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I do have one more question for you, or at least one more. You mentioned earlier that like Lionel Messi, best player in the world, helps Barcelona paper over some of the cracks. You mentioned Ronaldo kind of did that for Zidane at Real Madrid. Do you think there's a player either currently in the squad or elsewhere out there in the world that could do that for Manchester United? Because it does feel like that's sort of what Paul Pogba was brought in to do and hasn't quite been able to do yet.
The interesting thing is Manchester United had that player to paper over the cracks, and he blew out his ACL. Ibrahimovic was the man who, by all accounts, held that dressing room together in Mourinho's first season, and was the man to swing the sword and keep certain people in check. But following the ACL injury and his now sale to LA Galaxy, there are no real leaders in that Manchester United dressing room. When you look at that, the club captain is Antonio Valencia. He hasn't played since December. The current number 1 captain is Ashley Young, a player who is a 34 converted winger now playing at fullback who's not good enough. You look at the other men who have captained Manchester United this season. You've got David De Gea, who's not the player he used to be, a goalkeeper who possibly may move. You've got Paul Pogba, another player who's interested in moving somewhere else. You've got Chris Smalling, who the only nice thing I will say about Chris Smalling is that he got married in a white tuxedo.
I would agree with all of that. I enjoy that you put that into your Athletic article as well. Thank you for that.
I will put it in every single time. And those are the gentlemen. When you look at who the only current person in that dressing room who I believe is of the character to truly lead Manchester United forward, is leaving for Paris Saint-Germain in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And Herrera is leaving. So they need to buy someone who can basically like, hello, gentlemen, I am the next
all right, and
person we're going to be.
And is there anybody you would like to see? Is there any particular player that you think could help United do that, or you have a personal affinity towards?
I have absolutely no idea. That's the truly. It is very.
I appreciate that.
You very rarely buy someone and immediately make them your captain.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you're a European superpower, you should have had enough best practices in play that is not needed ever. So it's a truly unusual ask. So no, I have absolutely no idea.
All right, then I'll flip it around and ask this: is there a player that, like, if they are sold this summer or are let go or are not renewed, that you will look at it and think like, okay, that's a step in the right direction. We're definitely moving towards maybe a better season next year?
There are only really two. If you allowed me to play Football Manager or FIFA and went, what players are you absolutely not allowing to be sold from this Manchester United side? I would say Victor Lindelof. I think will become good and will be very much one of the captain class next season. And I very much want to keep Marcus Rashford. But I think everyone can either be improved upon or needs to have a serious discussion about their future. And that is truly remarkable. Manchester United are the biggest year zero club in European football right now.
That is accurate and surprising and kind of depressing all at once. So my final question for you will then be, without spoiling anything, I appreciate you putting in all the effort you've made to be on the show, because I know that you were up late watching Avengers Endgame. Which one was more satisfying to watch, Avengers Endgame or Manchester United recently?
Oh, Avengers Endgame.
Okay, that's good. All right, good. Good.
Although both things are about the fall of a dynasty, so, you know.
Well, that's a perfect note to end on. Carl, thank you very much for being on the show. If people want to hear more from you, read more from you, how can they do so?
You can find me on Twitter, Anchorman616, Anka being spelled Anka. You can read my work on The Athletic, and I'm sometimes on the Totally Football Show. Sometimes it's very weird going from Totally Football Show to Totally Soccer Show, but it's all fun. It's fun all the same.
I appreciate that. Well, Carl, thank you very much. We very much appreciate you being on the show.
You have a good day. Thank you. Bye.